Hello everybody, welcome back with the European Chess Club Cup round 3. Today we're probably going to be focusing on probably the England team and looking at that, right? Where's the England team? And maybe they're not on the live boards because we're so bad. In which case we won't be focusing on the England team. Doesn't look like we're on the live boards. Yeah, it's so tough, these kind of... hang on, we're on round 3. Is there a way we can get to... let's go down a little bit. Is there a way we can get down to sort of people like Daniel Fernandez, people like that? Doesn't look like it. That's weird. So basically, they only show a certain number of games. What about the women? Again, I think they don't show all the boards. So actually, we're probably going to be looking at the main boards in the Open then again. So let's have a look at Gukash's game. By the way, I'm quite hungry, so I'm probably going to have this orange. Should never eat while I'm on stream. Let's go from the start. By the way, my first gut instinct with this position is that black is doing quite well, but let's have a look. So Rauf Mamedov, who is Rauf Mamedov? I saw a video last night of Rauf Mamedov playing against Magnus Carlsen in a blitz game, and this would have been in Russia around about the early 2010s, like maybe 2010. And Rauf Mamedov surprisingly lost with black against Magnus Carlsen. Who would ever lose to Magnus Carlsen? However, that was probably in Moscow, right? I think a lot of these World Blitz Championships were in Moscow. Starving. Probably got diabetes. I've already had like a vegetarian breakfast today. I've had cornflakes. I've had a packet of crisps. Very bad diet. Vegetarian breakfast probably not so bad. Although that was fried. And cost me 15 quid for that with coffee. I wonder I don't have any money. Should just eat rice. I'm going to link my PayPal down below if anyone wants to send me some cash for this commentary. Try and set up maybe the Twitch with a donation button. I'm going into full desperation mode. Yeah, so the early World Blitz, I believe, was in Moscow. The first World Blitz in 2010 was in Moscow. Carlsen, I believe, won that. And then it sort of went around. So I think maybe one or two more in Moscow. And then I think it went to somewhere like, I think Dubai, potentially, maybe for a couple of years. I think Karyakin won one in Dubai. And I think Li Kuan Lem won one as well. I'm just thinking of possibly the Blitz, actually, rather than the Rapid. But and then there was one in... then they went to Saudi Arabia as the King, sort of like... King Salman Cup or something like that. There was one in Saudi Arabia, and then there was... Because it was mentioned Naroditsky never played a World Rapid Blitz. Apparently he's playing in New York this year, possibly Jospin as well. So it'll be interesting to see how those guys get on. The only downside of that move is you'd be worried about bishop f3, put the rook on a7. But possibly the rook will come to d7 and coordinate well with the black position. So bishop f3, rook a7. I mean, you could go knight e5, it's not impossible as well. Bishop b7 is coming, or maybe rook d7 potentially. If I go bishop b2, do you maybe even just go here? I'm not sure. E4, I mentioned this before that in Slav structures, in this kind of Slav, E3 Slav, E4 is a sort of move that white has to consider to maybe try and sharpen the game up. Now, if I take, obviously he must have sort of had some idea about what would happen if black takes that pawn. Possibly black could have taken the pawn. If you take with a knight, e1 is obviously a move. This is clearly giving white some kind of initiative. So black didn't want to consider this. And maybe you could get away with queen f8, I don't know, but this moves calculate a lot of moves there, like bishop f6, like knight g7 maybe, knight h6. Probably knight h6 actually. Queen f8, knight h6, king h8, knight g5 looks a little bit annoying. Yeah, I guess something like that. Because queen f8, knight d6, you have queen d6. And knight g7, queen g7 looks unconvincing, I would assume. So he went knight d7, very solid. And now he's gone knight h5, which again was, yeah, I was just saying that this looks, if you allow knight f4, you're in trouble. So he's gone g3, Mr. Gukesh. This looks okay for, well, probably for both sides. So what is the candidate move that black would consider here? I should straighten up a little bit. Do you eat out a lot? Actually, that's the question that I should ask. Like, do people eat out a lot? Do they? I mean, I eat out far too much probably. Also eat a lot of processed food because I go to places like Greggs, which is not good. Costa Coffee don't really have fresh food in there. It's all kind of processed. So when you go on a train journey, it's almost always processed because that kind of food is cheaper to produce. It's like Greggs is mass-produced processed food. Same with McDonald's to a certain extent. It's not freshly made salads and stuff like that, which could potentially be healthy. Like if you went down a salad bar or even Pret Manger, they have salad, which is reasonably healthy. But on trains, yeah, it's kind of unhealthy. You look at the menus, all unhealthy stuff because they're not going to make the fresh salad. It's too expensive for them to do that, and so they just do a lot of cheap processed foods so they can make a reasonable profit out of it. But obviously that leads to people having a worse diet because you go on trains. A lot of people go on trains all the time and you're eating rubbish. There's no choice. Obviously the only way around that is go to the supermarket beforehand, buy some food and then eat it on your journey, which I never do, which I should do. But g3, so yeah, so it's closing down that threat. So black now has to consider other options. Probably you don't go back to f6 because of the move e5. Maybe knight e5 is a potential candidate move, I don't know. Because I'm slightly concerned that white might play e5 themselves if we just leave it. There's also rook ac8. So I'm looking at knight e5 as a move, but then now I'm seeing that, well, there is this and then potentially this, but then d4's thing. And this actually, I think this kind of position is quite good for black actually, because you know, we've got pressure on here. If you trade, I've got pressure on d3, and not so easy for white. That does look like a scary move to calculate because, well, there's also knight c6. If you take, I take on e5. Maybe that's the problem. I'm hitting this, I'm hitting this. Now, when I take here, this maybe not necessarily threat because rook d3. So knight e5 is not the only move. There's also other options. Obviously, you've always got options in chess. It's the thing I always say to students. I say, most important thing is starting to see options, more candidate moves. If you're going along that track and you're seeing more moves, then in theory your job should be easier. Bogdan Diac has already drawn very quickly with, okay, this is some kind of theory. Line. I would imagine that this game is extremely accurate, and I played against, sorry, I'm getting mixed up. I've actually played this guy, but I was thinking getting mixed up with Daniel Dorada, and I played him, and he played at 99% accuracy, and I lost, unsurprisingly. I probably should have drawn the game, even though he played a 99% accuracy. But rook d8, and yeah, this is drawish, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, it's just a dead draw. So it's all like a theoretical line. He's playing against somebody who's quite strong, actually. Not a player I'm that familiar with. My guess is just 99% for both accuracy. Let's have a look. In fact, it was 100% for white, which is crazy. For black, sorry. White was 99%. That's just bonkers. So in total, the average centre pawn loss for the game was like 3 points or something. Absolutely bonkers. Yeah, that's kind of boring chess, right? But I think white just played for a draw. And so this team is named after Vuga Gashimov, who's an Azerbaijani grandmaster. Now there's also a Vuga Gashimov. There was a Vuga Gashimov Memorial. I'm not sure if it's still going actually. I know Magnus played there a few times, and he's won it before. And he's kind of from that same generation. I think he's slightly younger than Gashimov was, but not by much. And so he's probably friendly with Gashimov. But Gashimov, sadly, I think he had some health issues and he went into an operation on some kind of tumour or something, and it didn't go well. And he died, sadly. So, yeah, that's a sad story. So let's go to the Nordicbeck game. He's playing against... so for all these things, I turn off the engine eval. By the way, a lot of my videos I ad-lib. So when I'm doing that one where I'm talking to the camera, all my videos, I don't have a script for any of them. I'm talking, you know, off the top of my head. So obviously a lot of the time I'm probably babbling. So apologies for that. But yeah, it's not easy to, you know, talk. I mean, I quite enjoy talking, I must admit, but for that length of time. So he's got knight d5, very aggressive move, but of course that hits the e7 pawn, so black probably doesn't want to take on b2. Because if you take here, I've got knight e7. Potentially knight c8 is leading to a better position for white. Although there is this, right? What's this like? Black would be exchange up. I mean, you could either take here and take here. We'd have fantastic. Probably you would do this actually. This is actually favouring white, I would say, because this knight is bad. If you move the knight, I've already got one pawn for it. I've got the bishop pair. Again, it comes down to judgment. A lot of players would reject this variation as white. I think white is better here because they'd be worried about losing exchange. But I think white is better here. I mean, would the engine concur? I'd say the engine would give white an advantage here, maybe 0.7. No, I'm wrong. It actually says it's equal. Okay. Maybe there were alternatives that I'm probably missing as well in that line. Because where do you, but you could also go rook b1 actually. Yeah, that's also very relevant. And actually that would lead to white's advantage because this variation, at least we can move the pieces now. Yesterday we couldn't move the pieces. Yeah, white is much better here, I think. This is a much better version. So this is serious advantage because where do you move the knight? And this bishop is a little bit stuck. I mean, you can defend the bishop for the time being, but now I've got lots of nice alternatives like bishop f4, for example, is probably just winning. So this is just winning for white. Yeah. So he went back to d8. That makes more sense. Bishop d2, interesting. Didn't even bother to try and defend the pawn, but he wants to threaten bishop a5. That makes a lot of sense. So well calculated by white. So many good players now. The standard in chess is just rising every year, and it's kind of frightening actually. Just how many good players there are. There was a video I was watching yesterday on chess.com, and they were interviewing the players in US championships, and they were talking about what resources they use. Obviously, ChessBase came up a lot. People mentioned chess books. I thought Sam Shankland gave a bit of a pretentious answer, and he was saying, well, yeah, I've got my coach. So obviously he's quite closely associated with Jacob Agard and Jacob Agard. They do this Killer Chess Academy, which gets lots of rave reviews. Apparently, it's really good. Not surprisingly. But he was saying, yeah, I've got my coach and I do this and I do that. But, you know, I'm at the level I don't really need these other kind of resources. But I just felt it was a bit packed. I felt other people gave better answers and they basically said, yeah, you know, chess books are still quite relevant. But they're kind of maybe been passed, which, you know, they're kind of maybe less relevant than they were, and they're slightly old-fashioned now. Now you've got stuff like ChessBase. You know, that is, in my experience, it's very difficult to get good sales with books. But yeah, people mentioned Chessify as well. That's not a site I'm particularly familiar with, but apparently, I don't know if anyone's used Chessify, please leave your comments down below, but apparently that's really good because you've got lots of different engines on there and stuff like that. Anyway, knight b6, queen c6, knight d5, queen goes back, knight b6, queen b7, c3. So c3 is with the idea go d4, baby, and controlling the centre. The only problem with white's position is that knight on b6 is not particularly well placed. However, it can exchange for the bishop on c8, but again that would expose the b pawn through to attack. Maybe black at some point wants to put the bishop on e6 to kind of negate that knight. That's what he did. Probably not worried about f5 because he feels giving away too many important squares. f5 maybe comes into consideration, I don't know. Interesting, he just went rook f2 there. That's an interesting. Why has he gone rook f2? I think it's like a prophylactic move. He wants to eventually move the bishop and then he's defending the b pawn. Snorri is a very strong player. I mean, he's obviously, you know, genuine, proper top player, right? I mean, what is his chances of becoming world champion in the future? I would say pretty good. He's up there with people like Gukesh and Firouzja and Arjun as being like the best players of that young generation. I keep mentioning Praggnanandhaa as being potentially the best, but lately Praggnanandhaa has not performed well, so it's hard to say really because they're all very, very strong, and Gukesh at the moment is looking like the favourite in that generation to be the top player, but time will tell. How is Mr. Arjun getting on today? Also, we need to look at Pragg, right? He's got an e5, very aggressive move, very interesting move actually. Yeah, because I think one of his ideas, maybe he wants to go d4. Maybe that was why he moved the rook off. Very clever, you know, thinking. These guys are very bright. He's moved the rook off because he wants to go d4, but without allowing knight d5. But mind you, after this, you're hitting the knight, right? So you kind of have to do something about that knight. Maybe knight c4. Somehow that doesn't feel right, that move. But this also feels nothing for white, right? d4. But also b2 is hanging, so that doesn't really make much sense. I guess if you take on b2, I could hit your queen. Yeah, not great analysis by me, I have to admit. Let's go to Praggnanandhaa. We need Praggnanandhaa to get off the mark here. He's not had a good couple games, really, rating-wise. Somebody's mentioned he might be tired now. He's played a lot of chess. The danger is with these guys is they could suffer from burnout. They play so much. Arjun's another one. He could get burnt out at some point and just say that I've had enough. You know, I can't keep studying chess for 8 hours a day and playing every tournament under the sun. Do you think, I've mentioned this before recently, that playing a lot is the key to get into top form? I think if you only play every 3 months, I'm not speaking from personal experience, not everyone's the same. Some people can not play for 6 months, they come back, or even 6 years, or 60 years or whatever, slight exaggeration. But maybe they could even not play for 5 years, and they come back and they still play at the same level. I'm one of those people who can never do that. I always seem to get better after I played a tournament, and then I play another. My general feel is my third tournament is always my strongest tournament, and then I start getting into top form because I start to kind of make the connections in my mind, and Well, like I say, everyone's different. Some people can just play at the same level. They seem to play at the same level every single time. I think it partly depends on what style of player you are. I'm quite an intuitive player, so the more I play, the more I tend to trust my intuition. A4 is a good move, I would say, undermining black's. Whenever black plays the pawn to b5, A4 is always a good choice. By the way, somebody made a comment on my video yesterday about the Israeli conflict, and yeah, I wanted to say, obviously, I don't really know what's going on. I'd rather not talk about that whole thing because, to be honest, I'm not qualified to talk about it. It's obviously a very complex situation. People get very emotional about it, which is understandable. I wish we lived in a world where you didn't have all this bombing. Partly, I think the problem is all these weapons that we have. We've developed these weapons. I watched a very good documentary recently called Chimp Empire. It was amazing how human the chimps were in a way, and how we're sort of similar to the chimps. You know, how we're very chimp-like. Obviously, we're very closely related. Yeah, I think they're our closest cousins, right? In the animal kingdom is a chimpanzee. But yeah, there were kind of like gangs of them roaming through the forest, and they were attacking the other gangs. And it was fascinating, and I thought we're kind of still doing that, but now we're doing it with huge weapons and, like, you know, bombs and missiles and nuclear weapons, and you know, where does it end? You know, at some point you have to say this is madness. You know, why are you destroying yourself? I think mankind is inherently self-destructive. Yeah, rook c1. Yeah, it's all good positional stuff by probably both players, I would say. This position looks roughly equal. What is white's plan? What is black's plan? It's true that Praggnanandhaa, out of these players, Gukesh, that he gets compared to the most, and Arjun Erigaisi, is probably the most technical and most solid positional player. The other two, I would say, are more free-spirited, I guess is maybe the word you're looking for. Maybe a little bit more aggressive, where he's more like he's happy to grind away in the end game. So the obvious solution for white, I would say here, is probably black. Why did black play rook e7? So again, you think, what is your opponent intending to play? You think, well, why did they play that move? You're almost like a detective in a story. Why did they play rook e7? Because they want to go rook c7. They want to double on the c file, I guess. I don't know. I'm guessing. So one idea I think would be to go queen e2, and after rook c7, put the rook on c2. Or even go rook c2 immediately. Now, is the queen best on e2? Bear in mind, it doesn't really hit a6 because the queen is defending along with the bishop. Or is it better on a4? Or is it better on b3? Also something you have to take into consideration. But something like queen e, I'll calculate a variation. Let's calculate a variation. Queen e2, rook e7, rook c2, bishop d4, rook c7, knight d4. So went g6. Could go something like rook a1 and turning rook a4. Also queen g4 is possible. Probably you don't take on d4. You keep the bishop pair. I think black's main asset here is the bishop pair. White's main asset is controlling d4. But white to play Praggnanandhaa, what is he thinking about here? The guy is a really fantastic calculator. Always has been. You know, I remember some game he won in the Isle of Man years ago against sort of South American Grandmaster when he was just a kid, like 9-year-old or something ridiculous. And the variations he was showing after the game were just unbelievable. And I thought, you know, this guy is absolutely nailed on to be world chess champion in the future. There's no way you can be that good at 9 and not be world chess champion in one day. And yeah, his career's kind of followed that path to a certain extent because he's obviously right now bang up there with the top players. He's already played the candidates to get through to the World Championships. Let's have a quick little look at Arjun's game. Arjun the Exciting. So this is interesting. Michalewski is a well-known player. He's still quite active now, even though he's older. I think he's moved around a bit. I don't think he was always Israeli. I think he maybe was in Europe at some point. I'm not sure. But he won quite a strong tournament last year in Portugal, like Oro Open or something like that. I think a lot of streamers play there, like Anna Cramley and people like that. Let's have a look. Is this some sort of theory? Because it's still quite early in the game. So white goes e3. So white wants to undermine the centre. I mean, b4 is a move here. Maybe that doesn't quite work in this specific position. I know he's kind of moves, but given that what black can take out with a queen, that's probably not going to work. So yeah, I don't think that's really an option. So b3, he's gone for all this. He's taken. He's got knight bd2, knight e4. Makes sense, right? I mean, pretty much you probably have to go knight e4 there. See any other useful move. It's just in time with his play, knight h4, which again looks very strange. My favourite attack when I was younger was where you go knight h4, is some sort of like pawn on f6. And you go with queen h5 when the king's still on e8. So knight h4 is probably my favourite attacking move. Very deep and profound move by Viktor Michalewski. He was a very experienced player, by the way. Very strong player. Not sure I've ever played him though, even though he's been around for a long time, probably similar sort of age to me, right? Maybe slightly older or slightly younger, I'm not sure. Knight f5, I think he's slightly older actually. Yeah, so you would consider queen here. You would also consider coming back, but we noticed actually with these... Yeah, I mean, the first thing I'd think, would I even have the balls to go g5 there? Which again shows his aggressive attitude. I think if you go back, the idea is to go here. Which makes a lot of sense, because if you go to d2, I go f5 and that knight is trapped. If you go to g5, I have f5 and that knight is trapped. Or, well, it's not trapped, but it goes back to d2, g5, saying also after knight g5 is h6. Or maybe not h6 actually, because of queen g4. No, queen g4 would still not particularly work for white, I don't think. So it's gone g5, which is obviously the basis suggesting white has to go knight f5. And we've got this line. And actually, I think what's happened is black has gone queen e6. And white's gone knight f6 check. However, this is just rubbish. Well, I think the point is that if you go here, I go knight check, but then you can also go king h8. So black's two moves are king h8 and king g7. Interesting, but might be unsound. I'm not sure. But maybe he just thinks, well, I'm probably going to lose to this Arjun, this sort of 2800 monster anyway. So I might as well just get on with it. Get the game over with. You know, one way or another. I mean, if you go here, I could also consider knight e8, because after rook e8, queen g6. I'm not sure that's good for white though either, because after hg6, rook e8, knight c5, the pawn in d3 looks weak. You do have a pin along the back rank though in that line. If I go knight h5, king h8, then I'm pretty much forced to go queen h4 at the end. So what he said, okay, I'm going to check the engine here, because normally I don't check the engine, but this just seems like rubbish to me. What he's doing here, I don't really believe in what he's doing. It feels a bit desperate. Knight h4 feels a bit desperate. It's rubbish. So basically, he's obviously made this up, right? He just felt uncomfortable after knight g5. Try knight f3, come on. And he's gone knight f5, and this is just garbage. And you could even go f6 actually, is also good. It's also good. This is just, I don't understand why he's done this. So maybe it's Argent. I think the thing about this Argent, yeah, he's on a great run, but you also have to look at the opposition, and they haven't played well against him. And at some point, he's, you know, this is the thing about people having great runs. Don't get me wrong, obviously he's a very strong player, but people having great runs is partly down to your opposition. You're only allowed to play as well as your opposition allows you to. When people are just throwing games away like this, partly because they're intimidated, right? Because they're looking at this guy, he's a top player already. He's just having an amazing run. People throwing games away like this is not putting up great resistance, and other people, like people playing Prague, are playing great games, right? So, yeah, I mean, you look at Arjun, obviously, don't get me wrong, he's a very strong player, but I think you also have to take into account the fact people playing games like this where they're just losing a piece for almost no compensation. I mean, don't get me wrong, I wouldn't necessarily do him any better either, but it does seem a bit odd what he's done here. Like, this is just not good enough for White. Why would you think it is? So I don't really get what he's missing here. Why he's gone for all this? It's just maybe just a misjudgment, like I say, or maybe just felt that this was worse than it actually is. Because it's saying here this isn't great. This isn't great for White, but at least you're fighting. So that's often why people end up losing chess games, I find, at this kind of level. Either misjudgment, or they try to avoid a variation they don't like. So probably Michalewski saw this variation and thought, well, my knight on h4 is not very good, and you know, he's got all these moves where he can attack my pawn. So I played a different variation, and then you end up with something worse. So it's, you know, it could be a subject for another chess book. When process of elimination backfires. Any other interesting encounters? Was Vincent Keimer is always a vaguely interesting player. Seems to be slightly better there. No. I don't think he is actually. What's the pawn count? Black is a pawn up, right? But he's got double C pawns. So he's gone castles. If bishop d2 attacking knight, you can drop the knight back to b7. So actually I think that black is doing reasonably well here. I'm not sure if he's better, but he's certainly not worse. No, it actually says that black is worse here. So one idea which is very interesting. I should turn the engine off actually because it's making me lazy. Someone said this earlier, they were talking about on Chess Reddit. I read Chess Reddit too much, and they were talking about how you're analysing Tao's games. And they said Tao is like, you should analyse Tao's games with the engine on, and people were quite rightly saying no, you need to use your brain, because when you're using the engine all the time, you're not using your brain, are you? You know, and when you're playing over proper game over the board, you don't have the engine. And they were saying, yeah, okay, Tao's playing all these unsound sacrifices, yeah, which the engine would refute, but it's up to you to work out why they were unsound, not the engine. That's another thing. I think there's a myth around Tao that he played a lot of unsound sacrifices. I actually don't think he did. Even during his kind of peak years, which were probably, I mean, objectively his rating peak years were actually like 1970s, because he got to 2700. There's very few in that era who actually got over 2700. So Bobby Fischer was the first player to get over 2700. So the rating system, I think, first started around about 1970, created by a Hungarian mathematician and chess player called Arpad Elo. And Bobby Fischer got to 2785. However, none of his contemporaries really got to over 2700. So Mikhail Tao, I believe, was maybe one of the only few players who did. Karpov did later as well. But Tao did it later after Fischer had already retired. Maybe late 70s Tao was, or mid 70s Tao was like 2700. He drew a lot of games. And he, yeah, but I think there were other players of that era who you would have thought did get over 2700. Victor Korchnoi never got over 2700. But Jan Timman was a very strong player of that era. He never got over 2700. Boris Spassky's, I think, was peak rating was about 2660. I played Boris Spassky over the board in a French league game. It was a draw. Somebody else I mentioned, Tigran Petrosian. I think his peak rating was about 2640, 2650. So obviously they were very strong. Don't get me wrong, but I think now we've seen like generation shift. But yeah, what I was talking about with Tau was even you'd say his peak years were possibly in the early 1960s, late 1950s. Necessarily, maybe he was a stronger player when he was older as well. He was possibly because he gained all that experience and he used his experience well. He was also a hard worker as well. But I got the feeling when looking at his games that there was this kind of myth about how that he was always sacrificing material casually. That's not the case. In fact, when you look at the top players, the reason they're the top players is because they're more discerning about when they sacrifice. Whereas other players who try to play like Tau aren't necessarily as discerning. And the other thing is they were much better able to exploit that advantage when they got an advantage because their level of technique was higher. So they'd exploit the opportunities gained by that sacrifice. Whereas maybe a lower rate player, like myself for example, wouldn't necessarily be able to exploit those opportunities quite as well. So, because the level of technique isn't quite as high as with World Championship level players. I suppose the point I'm trying to make, this game looks kind of drawish. Although Black's kind of got what he wants, there's some slight weaknesses. You know, how do you win a game with Black against a solid player who's just basically just playing solid chess? This is one of the conundrums in chess. You know, how are these guys 27-30? I often look at my games from tournaments, I think, bloody hell, the computer said I played with 98% accuracy and I couldn't win against a 2200. Why couldn't I win against a 2200? Maybe I didn't make the game sharp enough. You know, the computer agrees with almost all my moves. Maybe I didn't make the game sharp. And somehow they got an ability, these players, to sense what moves are going to be awkward for their opponents. What are the best ideas? What are the most creative ideas? So this is like an example of a game where Black will probably end up winning because he's high rated. But like, how has he won this game? Because he's playing against somebody who's just played incredibly solid chess as White. Because he's incredibly good at calculation. I remember Michael Adam was saying once he analysed with Mamedyarov, and Mamedyarov was showing him like a 40 move variation into the endgame, and it was like, you know, unbelievable. Like, how can you calculate that well? Knight b5 is kind of screaming out as being potentially a counter move. Pawn on a7 is a little bit weak. You know, if you go here, I can trade and maybe you can't take with a bishop because the knight will be hanging on e5. So you have to probably take with a rook. Now in the knight a7, White is suddenly better with the pawn up, threatening to take there. So is knight b5 potentially a move, or is that just rubbish? It's also a6. This is possible variation. And actually, that doesn't look that great for White because I've got ideas like knight g6 coming. So what is it saying is the top move here? Oh, yeah, again, I'm getting lazy now. I want to check the engine. It's almost like a comfort blanket for me. I can't live without the engine. Maybe b3 is a move actually. Cement that, and then yeah, you want to go maybe knight c6, but now I've got bishop e3. I'm fairly sound, I think. Maybe not. Also moves like g5 there. g5 might be annoying because if you go to e3, I've got knight g4. And you have to go back to c1, which doesn't look particularly nice. If b3, there's also knight g6. What is the computer saying? It's actually, yeah, knight b5 it probably doesn't like because of a6. Oh, g5. It actually says the best move, which is not easy to see, is just to take and give black the bishop there. b3 I mentioned doesn't like, yeah, because this g5 idea is awkward. But h3 is not ideal either. So it's saying the best idea is to take and go f4. Yeah, but that's tough to see because it looks like you've given black the bishop pair and... But yeah, it's sound. Will white find that though? To be honest, I doubt it. I don't think that's obvious that line. What about this game? Parham is playing against Larisic from Lithuania, playing for SKJ Modra. Parham is playing for Turkish Airlines, so they're sponsoring this team. Turkish Airlines. They also sponsor a golf tournament, or they used to. I'm not sure that tournament. There's a Turkish Airlines Open. I'm not sure that tournament really has been going recently. Been won by Tyrrell Hatton and Brooks Koepka in the past. Both, ironically, now playing for Liv Golf. Bishop g5. Yeah, rook e1. So this is positions that I think you need to have in your locker. You need to know how to play these kind of isolated pawn positions, both as white and as black. Rook e1 is the standard move to play in these type of positions. You want to need your bishop. It seems to be quite a good version for black because after bishop e7, you've got this juicy square on b4 for the knight, and often white would have to pawn on a3 so that you can't link up with knight b4. Knight b4 is the move you want to play as black. But he hasn't even gone for that. I mean, I would strongly consider knight. It's interesting he hasn't bothered with knight b4. I guess the problem with knight b4, you quickly go into e5. And then you're ready for maybe aggressive ideas. I'm not sure what it is. Aggressive ideas, maybe just rook d1 and drop the bishop back. Maybe eventually go rook e3 if you get enough time. Rook e3 at the moment is running into maybe knight d5 ideas. I guess that knight b4 is not ridiculous, but he's gone bishop d7, which probably makes more sense. So I quite like the way Parham is playing this. Bishop e8, this is a very typical idea for black. Look how bomb-proof. Now a lot of amateur players would hate to play bishop. They would struggle to play a move like bishop e8. It's an ugly move which works in the kind of engine era. Rook on f8 is now dead, but it doesn't matter. It's all about keeping the position as it is and not giving white anything to work with. Gone bishop a2. But if the clock times are right, I mean, white is not being practical here at all. You can't leave yourself with 10 minutes left against... I'm not convinced about these clock times. They were kind of similar yesterday where they seemed to suggest that people were in time trouble when they weren't. Not sure about it. Not sure about it. But it'd be impractical to leave yourself with 10 minutes for the, you know, for so many moves. I think you do. Do you get extra time at move 40? I guess you do. In this. But it'd be very impractical to you to against somebody as dangerous as this Parham. So Parham is from Iran. That's a country that Ali Reza used to play for, but neglects to play for them now because he moved to France. I think France offered him some money. Potentially, but also I think partly the reason he left was because obviously Iran, you know, he's one of the top chess players in the world. He's got to play against everybody, and Iran have this kind of weird rules about you can't play against Israeli people, and you can't do this, and you can't do that, and it's quite a strict country. So we're getting into religion again and politics. But it's certainly a strict country in regards to women's rights, for example. There was in 1979 there was a Islamic revolution in Iran. There's quite a good show actually called Homeland, and they go into some of this. So everyone's seen Homeland. It's a great show actually with Damian Lewis and Claire Danes. And the first series is set in America, and they're basically the soldiers have come back. It's actually based on another show, I believe, which is actually it was an Israeli show actually, called maybe Prisoners of War or something like that, which is also a highly rated show. But in the first series, the soldier comes back, and the great twist is that they think he may have been recruited by the Islamic terrorists who held him captive when he was working in Iraq. When he was a soldier in Iraq, or possibly was it Afghanistan? I can't remember where he was actually based. I think it was Iraq. And so they're trying to figure out, has he been turned or not. So that was the great kind of storyline. But in one of the subsequent seasons, I think it might be season 3, he ends up in Iran, and that's a great series as well. I won't spoil it, but I'd watch that show if you get the opportunity. I watched a good show last night, a good film actually. It's called Women of the Hour, about this guy who's a serial killer. He ends up on a dating show. It's the number one film on Netflix, and it stars Anna Kendrick, who also directed it. It's a good film actually. Quite very creepy kind of serial killer main sort of character, very well acted by the main sort of actor. Not particularly original really, the whole material. You've seen this kind of Ted Bundy, very similar, right? Ted Bundy was a similar kind of figure. Probably the most notorious and famous serial killer in history was Ted Bundy. He was basically operating around like the Washington area in the late 1970s, early 1980s. I read several books about him actually, and there was one book which was quite good, and it talks about how he escaped from the courthouse the first time. I think he climbed out the sort of prison library or something, or the courthouse library, sorry, and then climbed out the window, and he ran up this kind of it was in Colorado where his courthouse appearance was meant to be, but he escaped. And then he ran up the mountain, and yeah, it was quite a good little story, but obviously led to people dying later, because he then got recaptured later on, put back in prison, and then he escaped again. I think through the window of his cell, through the roof of his cell, somehow he climbed out. And then he ended up murdering more people. What he would do is, his initial kind of murdering spree, he would have he'd have his arm in a cast, and he was sort of going around asking students for assistance, sort of like loading stuff into his Volkswagen Beetle. He had a yellow Volkswagen Beetle, and he'd sort of like make out he's injured. And some of them would assist him, and then he'd sort of he would subdue them in the car, and then he'd take them out somewhere out in the desert, and then he'd kill them. So that was quite horrific, but yeah, interesting reading about all that. It's quite a good book written by Anne Rule, who apparently claimed that she worked with Ted Bundy on a kind of Samaritan's helpline kind of thing. And it was called A Stranger Beside Me. Quite a famous book. Neil Halsarin, how's he getting on? This all kind of looks okay-ish for black. I think Neil Halsarin is someone to watch over the next few months. I think he's going to have a good run, maybe in the World Rapid and Blitz as well. He's an interesting character because he's fallen way behind some of his countrymen. Now, why is that? Maybe he's just not working quite as hard as they are. Maybe he's playing too much blitz. a lot of it comes down to hard work. You know, you assume that all these people are doing 8 to 10 hours a day, but maybe some of them are doing less and some of them are... But he's still a very strong player. Yeah, this is so. If you take it, yeah, I'm getting lazy now. Oh, there's already a perpetual, of course. Yeah, so I mean, I'm getting lazy. I'm turning on the engine. Okay, so we don't really know what's happening with Boris Gelfand. Already drew. Fair play to Boris. He could just retire, right? Got nothing less to prove. He loves chess. So he just carried on. He's carrying on. You know, he could just... What about Daniel Dorada? He's a good player. He's a player that I think is interesting, worth watching. I mentioned him earlier. Probably one of the best young players in Europe, right? Yeah, this is all very sound for black. And then H5, very Alpha 0x. Wow, that's an impressive move, actually. Possibly some kind of theory. Because knight g4 is now kind of an annoying threat, so understandably white played h3. So you've got h5 and h3 thrown in, and that might be slightly in black's favour. Bishop c6, all very sound. Queen d6, castles, right? Queen f4, not afraid to castle queen side. Yeah, I like the way black's done this. I think black's position looks quite sound, but white is also playing fairly solidly. I mean, that's quite a solid move. What I would consider here as black is just to take and drop the knight back to d7. Because I don't like the fact you can't bring the other rook to d8. Not the only option. So you have to consider all these options. If I go rook d7, bishop d7, sorry, rook d3, bishop d3, knight d7, if bishop d4, there's also, once you move the bishop, this starts to become a threat of b5 maybe, or they do have the f3 square I suppose, but then rook e3. So bishop d4, maybe I could consider e5. So rook d3, bishop d3, knight d7, bishop d4, e5, bishop e5, knight e5, rook e5, bishop f6. Does bishop f5 check there? Or even rook e3, bishop c3, bishop f5, king c7, rook c3, and white's a pawn up. So rook d3, bishop d3, knight d7, bishop d4, maybe just bishop f6. Bishop f6, gf6 is one option. b5, cb5, sorry, ab5, cb5, bishop f3. No, that's happened because he's gone g5. Okay, which is probably a more sensible move. So I think his idea actually is if white now goes b5, he wants to go a, b, c, b. Now you could also go bishop d5, it's also possible. But maybe his idea is to go rook f3, bishop, rook d3, sorry. Bishop d3, bishop f3. So b5, a, b5, c, b5. Bishop, yeah, b5, if white goes b5, you go a, b5, c, b5, rook d3, bishop d3, bishop f3, and if rook e3, I have g4, cementing the bishop. And that bishop would be very annoying if I can't get rid of it. But after g4, I could go hg4, bishop e2. Maybe. But that a3 is on prise in that position. And I could also just simply take on e2. Maybe knight d5 is also a move. Knight d5, bishop d5, rook c3. It's a little bit annoying, right? King d7, rook c7. King d6. Maybe I'm doing well actually, because you don't have a bishop c5. It's often easier to calculate endgames, I think, because there's less pieces on the board. Yeah, I like watching games of top players because I feel like I try to understand, why they're making the decisions they're making. Why are they doing what they're doing? What are they doing that I'm not doing? If that makes any sense. I should turn this light on as well because it's very dark in here. It's already getting quite dark. Yeah, why are they making the decisions they're making and I'm not making those decisions? You know, what are they... I think it's harder, though, when you get older to kind of close that gap because you don't absorb information as well as you do when you're younger. I've got this theory that, don't get me wrong, hard work matters at any age. You know, if you work hard, you're going to get rewarded. If I spend the next 2 or 3 years probably studying chess for 6 hours a day, every single day, and really grinding it out, I'm probably going to get much better results, right? But I do think it's harder to absorb information when you're older, and or it's, you know, somehow it's not quite as simple. So therefore, it's harder to close the gap to the top players. But yeah, I'm interested. Well, you know, why would I have gone G5 there? Probably not. You know, maybe is G5 even the top move? Maybe it's not even the top move. The top move was what I was suggesting, right? So G5 is not the top move, but somehow it makes more sense. But yeah, maybe I'm being harsh on myself because it's actually what I suggested, just doing this immediately. Was and I actually thought GF was actually completely fine. It is, but not the best. You actually just stay back a knight, but it's very drawish. This, so probably it's just G5 is like this. Is what I was saying earlier about, you know, how do these guys, you know, win these games and somehow I'm not winning them, right? It's because they're more willing to take risks, and you know, how do you beat a player who's a solid player, who's 24, 23, Hampus Sorensen, someone I've never heard of, who's Swedish. So apologies to Hampus. Never heard of him. But he's obviously very strong. He's got pretty much the same rate as me. I'm 24, 24, right? But I'm significantly older. He's probably like 16 or something, right? Maybe not 16, but very young. Yeah, how do you beat someone like that? If they're just playing white and they're playing solid moves, they're not making blunders. You have to play creative, ambitious chess. You have to play accurate chess. It's not easy. So at some point, White would hope... I think at some point White will make a mistake. It's my prediction in this game. I could be wrong. I think there's enough dynamic elements in this position for Black to easily win this game. Go on and win this game. I like G5. I know the engine preferred Rook D3 and Knight D7. Only by a tiny fraction. But I still like G5. What about Ivanchuk? Seems to be roughly equal this game, maybe. So should we go back to the top boards? Let's see what's happening in those games. We've had some developments. So we saw it after G3 and that really stopped that knight jumping in. Not a move I considered. I was considering Knight E5 as being maybe the top move. It's interesting he went Bishop C5, which actually makes a lot more sense because, you know, you don't want to allow this kind of stuff with Knight C6. I'm sure that's a better move. Again, I could check with the engine. Is my move, Knight E5, the top move, or is Rauf Mamedov's Bishop C5 the top move? Knight E5 is the top move. I should be playing in these leagues. I'm a better player than these players. Bishop C5, absolute garbage. No, it's the same. It actually says it's the same. They're more or less the same level. That was why I was a little bit... Because now this knight does get sidelined a little bit, so obviously you have to play quite accurately. But it's kind of maybe a more ambitious way to play for Black. So he's gone Knight C5. Bear in mind that taking is not forced. White could also drop the bishop back to B1. Is there potentially maybe repetition coming with bishop B1, knight D7, bishop B4? I doubt it. I think Gukesh tends to sort of take chances if he can. If you take on B7, I can just take out the queen, and if you go rook FD1, bear in mind that that knight is not easy to trap because G4 will always run into knight F4, and knight G5 can always be met with G6. So that knight in H5 at the moment is Well, knight g5 at the moment is anyone who runs to queen g5, so it doesn't make sense. So after bishop b7, queen b7, knight g5, you would have g6. So I feel like this is finely balanced, and black is doing a pretty good job so far of navigating the early middle game. But of course, the position is very complicated. He's probably going to have to play very, very accurately later, because Gukesh, we know, will generally find the best moves. He's a very, very tough player. Again, what's the engine saying? Getting lazy now. I actually didn't like the way that black handled this position. He said he shouldn't go there. He should go rook a8. So that's what I think about GMs like Mamedov. They want to follow a plan. So it's understandable he went there, because at least he's got a threat. Like, you know, he's making progress in the position. Yeah, so this is actually not that great for black. If white plays accurately, he has to go rook c2. I don't quite understand why you can't just go queen 4. Well, apparently this position is just for black. It's just, there's no easy way to make progress, and white's just going to improve by bringing the rook to c1. The other rook maybe. You can't hammer down this. Your knight is not really doing anything. The knights look good, but they're not. The knight can't jump to f4, so I'm controlling the game. So I think Mamedov's got his work cut out now. He should have gone for my knight e5 move earlier. Yeah, this game looks, again, in the balance. I would say that this is slightly favouring black, but only very slightly. No, it says slight edge for white, but yeah, there's really nothing in it. Brag game. Prag's been, as I keep saying, you know, he's just facing players. The same thing happened in Olympia. He's just facing players who just seem to be inspired when they're playing them. Sometimes you get that, and you think, why do all my opponents just always play the best moves? It gets frustrating. And I'm always playing this guy who's just playing unbelievable chess, and you know, he's like 200 points lower rated than me, and you start to feel a bit sorry for yourself. What is the engine saying here? Yeah, rook a1, very profound Pragananda type move. But white doesn't have any advantage here. I mean, certainly not. Maybe even slightly worse for white. Yeah. It doesn't like what Prag's doing. So, again, he's under a bit of pressure. Interesting scenario where he's under pressure. Arjun, I think, is just winning. He's just going to win. Yeah. So, to be honest, I might even just leave it there, to be honest, because none of the England guys are playing today, or they're not on the top boards. I think we covered. What was the most interesting game today in your opinion? For me, hard to say actually. There are no like really riveting battles, but I would say that's interesting. Just a misjudgment there by white. Also, the Gukesh game is interesting, very sharp, and the Pragananda game is interesting as well. And I quite like the Daniel Dorada game. It's just the end game. The Parham game is very much in a balance, but you'd think with that time advantage he's going to win. Where was the Daniel Dorada game? That was lower down, right? Yeah, white's still thinking. So this is very much in the balance. But yeah, again, please leave your comments down below. Would you like me to focus on a particular player in the future? Do you enjoy these commentary little sessions? I think they'd probably be easier if I was sort of doing them with somebody else, you know, like when I did a commentary at the British Cup times with Adam Hunt. I'll be honest, it was much easier having Adam there. If I would do it on by myself, it would have been really, really tough. And also, Adam was good technically with the computers. Is good technically. I did it with I did the commentary with Natasha Reagan, and she's very good as well. She did a good masterclass during that British in Hull. Wonder where the British will be next year. Leave your comments down below. Where would you like to see the British Championships next year? Why don't tournaments like the European Club Cup ever come to England? We never have tournaments like that here, do we? We never have like European Blitz Championships. We never have European Rapid Championships. We never have the World Rapid or Blitz. We did have the candidates, I think in 2012, it was one of the Magnus won. We generally don't have big FIDE events in England, which is surprising given that we've got a great history of chess. Why is that? I think it's partly to do with the high rent that people charge in London. And it's also partly to do with I just noticed this thing on the monitor. It's a computer evaluation. No, it's this sticky white paper that's been on there. I've never taken it off, which is weird. Yeah, the computer evaluation. What's happened there? Something's happened with this game. Maybe I think the moves are messed up here because this doesn't look right. Something's gone wrong, unfortunately. Yeah, someone's inputted it incorrectly. Yeah, I was going to say that the rent for a lot of these tournaments is obviously if you have a tournament in London, then the rent is going to be very high. It's going to be very expensive to put on, especially if you're putting up players as well, because the hotels, the number of amount of cost that's going to be quite horrific. We're having in New York. It's also finding a venue that's big enough to accommodate a large number of players is not easy. Not large number of chess players, and having the but if you've got a chess, why not have like a World Rapid and Blitz in London? I think that would be an interesting event, and I think maybe we need to find someone who's got the sort of passion to put that on. Maybe I'm the man, right? Anyway, thanks for watching the video. Please leave your comments down below. Please subscribe and possibly donate to my I'll leave my PayPal link down below if you want to donate like a $5 to a struggling GM. I won't pretend I'm going to give it to charity. I'm probably just going to put it on my card so that I don't end up becoming bankrupt. I'll try not to gamble it. Try and fail probably.